So this story is why I'll probably stay single for the rest of my life. Last year, I had broken up with my girlfriend of over 4 years. I had thought she was going to be the one that I was going to marry until I found out she was sleeping with her boss, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, I'm younger, I stay in shape, and I make pretty decent money. Even though the breakup hurt, I knew that I could still find somebody else. I lived in Manayunk, Pennsylvania at the time, which is a suburb city of Philadelphia. Since I was freshly single, one of the things I mainly did was go out to bars and clubs and try to meet new people. It was a Friday night, and I was at this cocktail bar by myself. This never bothered me, as I always had good self-confidence to go to places alone. This girl sat next to me, and it was an instant connection. Her name was Bethany. She was there with a few of her friends, but we started talking and chatting to the point that it almost felt like we were on a date. Our conversation goes so well that I end up inviting her back to my place, and she agrees. We ended up drinking more at my place and eventually ended up in the bedroom. This all sounds like a great night, but it wasn't. We had both passed out on my bed, and at 2:30 a.m. I woke up. When I did, I noticed that Bethany was quite literally straddling me, but not in the good way. My vision was hazy and foggy because I had just woken up. I noticed Bethany was holding two things. In her first hand seemed to be some piece of sharp broken glass. I also noticed that she was bleeding. In the other hand, she was holding my phone. When I was fully conscious of the situation, Bethany put the piece of glass to my neck and asked me who the other girls were. She was referring to my phone. She was in my photo album where there were pictures of me with friends and family. No nudity or nothing. Literally just my friends. I tried to explain this to her the best I could with the glass to my neck, but she just wasn't listening. The kind, sweet girl who I thought I met at the bar seemed to have turned into this vicious maniac. She said that's BS. I'm just like every other guy who has tons of women and just disregards her. She was starting to almost hyperventilate, and I was terrified she was going to nick an artery in my neck. I suddenly bucked her off me, and she fell hard onto my bedroom floor. I quickly ran out of the room, grabbed my phone that she dropped, and locked it from the outside. Bethany was clawing and scratching at it, saying she was going to kill me and then herself. I thought I could just wait it out, but she seriously wouldn't stop. I had no choice but to call the police and have them come over. When they did, it literally took 2 cops to sedate her and calm her down. It was a super long night, and the police asked if I wanted to press charges. I felt bad because clearly Bethany had mental problems, and I decided not to. The last I heard, Bethany was sent to some institution upstate and has been trying to heal from whatever trauma she's been through. By the way, that was my first one-night stand ever, and it was a complete nightmare. I think I'm better off single. So, for reference, I've been a single mom for the past few years, and let me tell you, the dating scene sucks. I either run into creeps, weirdos, or guys who just aren't my vibe. Well, around this time last year, I was out with a bunch of my girlfriends at this nightclub that played pretty good music. I honestly wasn't even looking to talk to guys or anything, but I did catch the eye of this man who was about 6'5" and had amazing dark hair. I noticed him staring at me, and I stared back, as a way to invite him over to come and talk. He came over and introduced himself as Shannon. Needless to say, he was a really great guy, and we ultimately ended up going back to my place to spend the night. And don't worry, my daughter wasn't home when this happened. I would never bring a man home with her there. She was at my mom's house for the weekend. Anyway, the next morning we both woke up in my bed, and I don't know what it was, but I just wasn't feeling Shannon's vibe. I don't regret what I did, but I have this intuition that has never let me down. Well, Shannon leaves my place and tells me that he'll text me later. But by then, I'd already mentally checked out and didn't see this relationship going any further. And when he did text me later that day, I told him exactly that. Except, he did not take it that great. He started freaking out on me, calling me a slut and a used-up whore. I knew I had made the right decision by cutting things off with this guy. Well, get this. A day after that happened, I was at the grocery store picking things up, and who do I see in the line behind me at the checkout? Shannon. He tried saying something like sorry for his outburst, but I just told him not to talk to me and left the store without another word. Then, a few days after that happened, I was at my job, which was a nail technician in a salon, and out of nowhere, Shannon comes in. I could tell that he's been crying, and he came up to me while I was working on a client and confessed his love for me and begged for us to hang out again. It got so bad that my boss had to threaten to call the police if he didn't leave. A few weeks had gone by, and I stopped seeing and hearing from Shannon. I was starting to think he finally moved on, but I was wrong. I was back at my apartment with my daughter. I had just put her to bed when there was a knock at my door. It was at 9 p.m. at this point, and I went to go see. I looked out my window and saw Shannon standing there. Again, he was crying, but this time he had something in his hands. I didn't open the door and yelled from the window to get the hell off my property, but he didn't listen. I saw what he had in his hands was a hammer, and he started bashing my front door with it. He was yelling, cursing, and slurring his words. I could tell that he was drunk. He was banging the door so hard that my daughter started crying from her bedroom. It was just the two of us in the apartment, and there was no way I could fight him off if he broke in. I dialed 911 from my phone and yelled at him that I'm calling the police. He didn't care. He said he'd kill me and then them. Terrified, I ran and grabbed my daughter and locked ourselves in her room. We waited in her room for the police to show up when we heard the front door break down. Shannon was in our apartment. He was screaming, and we saw the doorknob twist. He yelled, "I know you're in there," and started banging the door with the hammer again. I honestly thought this was how I was going to die, and was praying to God for protection. But just then, I heard other shouts. They said for him to put the weapon down and get on the ground. It was the police. Long story short, Shannon was arrested and sent to jail for his attacks. Both my daughter and I are still traumatized, but we have been healing. For anyone who is single out there, please be careful who you sleep with and who you bring around. Psychos are everywhere. So during my 20s, I did not have my life together. I was a complete mess and hadn't figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And for reference, I am a female. Well, the one good thing I had going for me was I did have a job. I worked at a small auto body shop as an assistant. The one cool thing about working there was that it was family owned and not some big corporation. It was a Friday night and we were having a work party. I believe the shop had hit its goal for the month and we were celebrating. The owner of the shop, his name was Mike. The party was at his place, which is very nice, and there were about 15 total employees, so the party wasn't too crazy. Well, after I'd been drinking a bit and celebrating, Mike and I ended up hooking up. I know, it was very, very stupid of me to do. I wasn't thinking and was caught up in the fact that he was a successful businessman with a nice house. I'm a dumbass, I know. I ended up staying at his place for the night, and the next morning it was super awkward. But as I was gathering my things and getting ready to leave, my boss said that he hopes that we can continue hooking up. I nervously laughed and said I'm not sure. In my heart, I didn't want to because just how awkward it was. But then he hit me with a bombshell. He told me if we don't continue to hook up, he'll expose me. Then he showed me on his phone pictures and videos that he took of us last night. I must have been too drunk to realize he took photos because I definitely wouldn't have agreed to that. I was actually terrified at this point because I had never realized my boss was actually a monster of a human being. I told him flat out that I quit my job and I'll never work for someone like him. I stormed out of his house and drove home crying. That night, I had family members message me saying they received photos from my boss of me and him. He actually sent them and exposed me. I cannot tell you how low and disgusting I felt. I seriously was on the verge of just ending it all. The only way I could deal with all the stress was to just go to sleep and hope it was all a nightmare. But it was reality. I woke up that same night at 2 in the morning. Despite all my despair, something had woken me up. I heard some sort of tapping noise coming from outside my place. I looked out my windows, but I didn't see anything. The realities of my shitty situation came flooding back again, and I just forced myself to go back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and was about to get into my car and go see my parents. I had to explain what was going on. But when I tried to start my car, it wouldn't start. All the lights on my dashboard were on. Since I worked at the auto body shop, I knew a bit about cars, and after some investigation, I found out my fuel pump fuse had been tampered with. I thankfully had a Ring camera that faces my driveway, and guess who was responsible? Yep, my old boss, Mike. I told this to my parents, and they told me that I have to get the police involved, and I'm so glad that I did. I told my story, and Mike was arrested. After he was arrested, he was also exposed for blackmailing me. We lived in a small town, and word got out really quickly that it was a piece of shit. His reputation was ruined, and he even went out of business. I realized that you don't have to be a victim of your own story. You can stand up to your monsters and actually win. Please be safe, everyone, and thank you for listening.